So Reuben, can you remember what happened last year?
What?
Were you playing on the bed with Harry? And what happened?
I jumped on Harry.
And what happened when you jumped on Harry?
I fell on an iron.
You fell on an iron. Did you roll off the bed and fall on the iron? And what happened when you fell on the iron? Did you get a burn?
But Magic Finger didn't get anything, did he?
No. So it was July last year and Reuben got a burn on his chest. So we basically came up to the hospital on the evening, the Monday evening, probably about 11 o'clock. And Reuben had got, what to a mother was quite a horrible burn, but it turned out potentially second, third degree burns. And because the burns unit was closed at Chelmsford, we referred to Chelsea and Westminster for 9 o'clock the next Tuesday morning. So we drove down to London the Tuesday morning, where we saw the doctors, and you played in the playroom. So they debrided the burn, covered it up, and Reuben was full of beans. For a child that had had lots of morphine, he had an immense amount of energy. They gave us a leaflet which said, any problems at all, come back to Chelsea and Westminster Hospital.
Again.
So yes, we went home and you were so tired because you'd been up most of the night that you slept all through Tuesday night, and then you woke up Wednesday morning. But Wednesday morning you were poorly, weren't you? Yeah, he woke up on the Wednesday morning and he wasn't right at all. And initially I put it down to the fact that he may have had significant lack of sleep, but he was hot but shivering, and he also had a rash on his inner thigh, and his hands and feet were cold. So just really monitored him, tried to get him to drink, and at that point he just wasn't interested in anything and was just wanting to sleep and in and out of sleep. So looked back over the leaflet that Chelsea and Westminster had given me, and they said, don't go to your A&E or your doctor, contact us because burns are a specialist. So I phoned up Chelsea and Westminster and relayed, partly because I thought I might be a neurotic mother and maybe this was just normal. He'd never been ill. He'd been to a doctor's once in 2.5 years just for a viral infection. So he'd always been 12 hours on the go, 12 hours asleep. So I phoned them up and they said, it sounds like it's an infection relating to the burn. Take him straight to your A&E. Take all the paperwork you've got and get them to give us a call because it's directly relating to a burn. So I got him in the car, and on the way to the hospital, you were sick all over your car seat, lots and lots. So we quickly called to see Grandad because there was sick all over Mummy's car, wasn't there? So we came in on the Wednesday afternoon, it would have been, and we were up here for nearly 4 hours and he was asleep, lethargic and very restless the whole time, in and out of sleep, not wanting to get down and play. I gave all the paperwork that I'd been given by Chelsea and Westminster and said to call them. They've said it's relating to the burn. He was monitored. Because of the debridement from the day before, he was very scared of the doctors, but he would let them take sort of saturations and things. They couldn't get a blood pressure because he just wouldn't cooperate, and he was just laid on me. So they gave him Calpol. His temperature was up and his breathing wasn't right. That did reduce his temperature, and he got up probably for about 5 minutes and played, which was still significantly different to what he's normally like. The Monday night we brought him in, even with the burn and the morphine, he caused chaos and put bubbles all over the floor and running up and down and in and out of the consultant's office. So it was just completely out of character. Tried to get him to eat and drink, and he would try and sit, but he was saying his throat was hurting and didn't want it. It was 4 hours of a very heavy, because he's quite a big 2-year-old.
What was it, Mummy?
You were cuddling Mummy, weren't you?
Yeah.
And it was a very hot day and a very busy day. So we saw the doctor eventually, and he said that it was that you'd got a very poorly sore throat. They looked in his throat and that he'd got a very badly smelling breath. And I did have concerns after reading this leaflet, although I, to be honest, had never even considered toxic shock and burns or even really understood sepsis. Something wasn't right with him. And that did completely reassure me that there was absolutely nothing to worry about. I'd got the penicillin, and it was said at the end, you know, if you're worried about anything, to come back. But obviously I'd been to the hospital out of worry and had been completely reassured, particularly as they said it was possibly tonsillitis, and my eldest suffers from quinsy, so I know how severely it can affect children and make them feel quite low. Went home, kept trying to get him to drink anything, and obviously he'd got a severe sore throat, so he was not interested in drinking anything. Next day he woke up and my mum came over to see him. She said, Lou, he's absolutely not right. And I said to my mum, well, to me, he's exactly the same as when he was discharged from the hospital. They've said it's nothing to worry about, that the penicillin will kick in. He'd had diarrhoea all evening, which they said could happen because of the penicillin. And he was in and out of sleep all day, and I thought it was all related to what I'd been advised. So Mummy phoned up Chelsea and Westminster Hospital once again because they'd been the specialist that I'd spoken to, and they said to take him straight into accidents and emergencies and advised it's likely toxic shock syndrome, and if there was any issues at all, getting him seen immediately to contact them, and that the doctors here could phone. So we obviously came in, and I think then I sort of realised the severity of it, and me being me, I did a lot of research and was looking up the impact of sepsis and toxic shock, and decided I better not keep doing that because it can, you look at what the worst is, and the worst was potentially happening. I think it was one of the doctors sort of said, your child is severely ill, and at that point I think it was clear to me that it was life-threatening, and a lot of his veins had broken down, so they had to try and drill into his leg, which they couldn't do. Advised that at one point he was going to be transferred to Chelmsford, then that became St Mary's in Picu. Next day, so he was not intubated overnight, and I slept in intensive care with him, and he was still with it and chatting. So I think that's one of the signs that you wouldn't expect possibly to see, was the fact that he was so coherent but so poorly. And then on the Friday, the CATS team came up, and we were told it'd be 2 to 3 hours for them to prepare to transport him, and that took several hours, at which point it was also clear that something else was going on. We blue lighted all the way down to St Mary's, which was another indicator that it was quite severe. Got to St Mary's and saw some lovely consultants who advised us that it was going to be touch and go for the next 24 hours, and if he could get through the night and be stable and make it, that was going to be a bonus. So after a very sleepless night, the next day things started looking like they were improving regarding actually reliance on all the sort of drugs and things. We weren't out of the woods, but we spoke to the consultant, and they said that there's damage. His legs by this point were black, as were his hands, and he got a patch on his stomach. So they talked about him having a fasciotomy because that leg the right leg had swollen up significantly. So he had emergency fasciotomy, and they said the potential was that he was going to lose his hands and legs, but it looked like he was out of the worst of it. But we were going to take it slowly. There was no point rushing to take him off critical care. The operation, there was talk of risk that he would lose a lot of blood and the whole host of everything else that you have to go through in order to have these operations. He came out quite quickly and recovered really well from that. And so the next few days were just really a waiting game, reducing the drugs down and seeing how he got on. And then it would just be a year and a few days ago, so it would be July, beginning of August last year, they woke you up, which was exactly a week after you'd been taken into intensive care. And you came round remarkably well. You did very well. So we spent a couple more days in St Mary's, and then you were transferred up to Chelmsford. So he had a skin graft initially, and then 2 or 3 weeks later he kept getting infections, temperature going up, spikes in temperature, and the decision was made to not delay the amputations any further. There was nothing to be gained by delaying it. So he had the bilateral below knee amputations and amputations of the fingertips. About a week later we had just some further surgery just on the fingertips, just where they're a bit long. And since then it's just been onwards and upwards for you, isn't it? He made a remarkable recovery. There was a few setbacks with getting to eat and drink and everything else he needed to do, but I think we had 6 weeks in Chelmsford and we finally came out. Then you got your first legs. What were your first legs called? What did we have on them? Tractors? Yeah. So he got his first set of legs probably December time, which were quite short ones just to get his balance. He absolutely hated them. He hated them over Christmas until he found his way. He hated physio because he's been told what to do. He's quite independent and sussed everybody out. But come January, he'd kind of worked out how to walk on them in his own time. He got a new set in January because they weren't fitting properly. And since then, he's done amazingly well. So I guess the point that we're here really is from I'm planning to do a lot around sort of sepsis and sepsis awareness, because it's one of the major things I certainly know for the NHS that it causes you lots of cost, loss of lives. And although the argument is with him that toxic shock is very rare, the indicators for sepsis and toxic shock are absolutely the same. So had he been treated and given the intravenous and everything that he'd needed early on, he would have made a full recovery. We have had the full admission and we're now going through that process, which for me, I'm very grateful. That's a huge relief. But we'd like to work with the NHS to look at what we can do just to get that second line of thinking. So from my perspective, it was a doctor that was given not just a child presenting unwell. This was a child that 2 days previously had a burn. And even if you're not a burns expert, your own guidance says refer to a burns unit because it's specialist. I'd already phoned the burns unit and they'd said to contact you. So if a child does come in that has something else, has seen an expert or an experienced consultant in another area, even just making that phone call could potentially have prevented this happening. And he came that close to losing his life. And I appreciate you're very busy, but it's ruling sepsis out rather than going straight for your diagnosis. Although the indicators were there for tonsillitis, sore throat is one of the signs of toxic shock and sepsis as well. So it's just a kind of reminder to take that step back and think of the bigger picture and just rule something out, even by just making a phone call, even looking at the burn could have absolutely prevented all this happening to Ruben. I'm very grateful because I've had the difficult end of the NHS. I've also had some fabulous people in the NHS looking after him at St Mary's. And Chelmsford, for which he wouldn't be here if it hadn't been for the treatment they've provided. So that's really our plea, is just have that second thought. The febrile child guideline wasn't done with him.
What did you do that noise?
I don't think there's a standard to when it should be done. I think there's a guidance, which I'm sure you've got huge amounts of guidance, but by just having that second pair of eyes and just he was in the red category, he was actually discharged with a heart rate of 190. To me, that should never have happened. And that was put down to his fear of doctors. And I guess even for a simpleton that's not a medical professional, that anxiety can increase heart rates, but to the point where it's 190 red category, even to me is questionable. So it's just thinking, is that reasonable? And even if you do think it's reasonable, that additional period of monitoring would have seen that he was 172 when he came in, 190, and it would have just hopefully picked up that actually he wasn't getting any better. So that's the plea that we've got really, is just take that step back and have those few seconds to think about actually what you're diagnosing and is there anything else going on.